I think quarantine might actually be driving me crazy. Genuinely, I feel like I might be losing my mind just a little bit. My kids haven't stopped scream fighting over the same toy for days. I've actually considered cutting my hair with a knife, kind of like that crazy lady on Facebook. I'm pretty sure that some of my kids' Lego figurines are trying to talk to me. I really want to get out of this house. And wearing a mask doesn't count going to the grocery store. Is your particular variety of quarantine driving you insane too? I mean, I'm sure it probably is. It's driving everybody insane. But seriously, like, are you feeling a little bit off emotionally? We're 5-ish weeks, depending on when you watch this, into this whole social distancing thing and like quarantine. And man, I know that I'm feeling a little emotionally off. Um, for example, two of my sons had birthdays in the past 2 weeks, and some of our friends did this drive-by birthday party for each of them. And as amazing as that was to have some people care about my family that well, love our family that well, two different times, um, it also made me a little bit angry, if I'm honest, like frustrated with the world for my sons. Like, I want to fix this for my kids, for my family, for everybody. I want to fix this. I want to do something to help, and all that we're told we can do is to stay home. For me, it's like a feeling of helplessness, a squirmy, like, feeling of pent up creativity or angst, or I'm not even sure exactly what. But do you feel that? Do you feel like the world is broken, and no matter what you want to do or how much you want to do it to fix it, you can't even take a step towards something better? Does the weight of this collective worldwide suffering, uh, yours and everybody else's, does it sit heavy on you right now? Do you identify with these words at all? They're from Lamentations chapter 1. This is what it says: how lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow she has become. She who was great among the nations, she who was a princess among the provinces, has become a slave. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she has none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They've become her enemies. For these things I weep, my eyes flow with tears, for a comforter is far from me, one to revive my spirit. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. Man, I sure can identify with some of those words. They're not mine. They're from Lamentations. They were written like 2,600 years ago, after the destruction of the city of Jerusalem. That's how the book of Lamentations starts, with loneliness, with emptiness, feeling abandoned, hopeless. Tell me that doesn't feel just a little bit relevant to you right now while you sit in quarantine, Christian or not. This is the second study that I'm doing in the book of Lamentations. If you haven't watched the first one yet, I'd suggest you go check that out before you get much further in this one. We've been studying the book of Lamentations to learn how to lament, which I think is super necessary right now in quarantine. And it's something that I think is missing from our toolbox as Christians here in Western Christianity, in America in specific, for how we're supposed to deal with pain and the suffering that we experience. Not just for COVID-19, but like all the time. So today I want to give you a bit of a primer on how you can actually do it, how to lament, or maybe more like an encouragement to lament with a few suggestions from the Bible and from my experience. But first, I think we need to catch the fact that Lamentations as a book and your lamenting process will actually help you give voice to some of the feelings that you're experiencing in your pain. It might be all sorts of different kinds of feelings. I'm not sure exactly what yours is. Maybe it's the loneliness that we just talked about. Maybe it's that sense of abandonment and being isolated. Maybe that's an overwhelming feeling for you in suffering right now. Maybe that's not what you're feeling. Maybe the overwhelming sense of the weight of the suffering that you're experiencing right now is related to the idea of, man, I got to put my head down. I got to suffer through this. Joy is going to come at the end when we're finally let out of quarantine, and then we'll hug every single person that we see in the street. like joy comes at the end. There's no joy to be found in the middle of all of it right now. I mean, you've heard Psalm 30, chapter 5, right? Weeping lasts for the night, but joy comes in the morning. When it's all over, that's when we rejoice. But not yet. Right now, we just suffer, right? Maybe that's something that you're feeling. But Lamentations has this weird thing where it says that joy is to be had in your suffering. In fact, in chapter 3, the lamenter is in anguish, and somehow he says that the reminder that God is his portion gave him hope and joy in his suffering. Is that even possible? I mean, maybe our definitions are a little bit off. We'll talk about that too. Or maybe you echo the lamenter when he says, "Why, God, do you forget us forever? Why do you forsake us for so many days? Restore us, unless you've utterly rejected us." How many days have we been in quarantine now? It's a long time. It's a lot of days, right? And even when we get out, will life really go back to normal? How do we find hope for better days ahead? Well, these feelings, these might be your feelings, but these are also themes that run their way through the book of Lamentations because they're normal. They're normal feelings that humans feel in suffering. And lamenting helps us to express them, but not just express them. It helps us to understand and connect with God through them. As I said in the last video, he wants to hear you express these things. So the question is, for today, the question is, how? How do we do this? How do you lament? What does it look like? Well, I have 4 encouragements to lament that may help. 4 encouragements. The first is this. First, run to God in your suffering, whether it's big or whether it's small. And believe it or not, many of us actually struggle to do this. When we're feeling the weight of our suffering, many times we run to other things than God. We tend to numb our pain, trying to just feel it a little bit less for a while. Sometimes we just avoid what we're feeling altogether and just refuse to reflect on the pain. Like, only joy, only happiness. I only want to watch comedies. I don't want to think about the pain. We just numb it with alcohol or food, or we binge watch stuff on Netflix or Hulu or whatever service you have. Or we play compulsively silly games on our phone, all attempts to just numb the feelings that we're experiencing. Other times we tend to wallow in our pain. We talk about it constantly. We're perpetually posting these "only my real friends will read this" types of posts or memes on Facebook, begging people to express some kind of encouragement or give me a like. Or perhaps you play the who's got it worse game, where when anyone tells you how bad they have it, the first thing you say is, well, you think that's bad? Well, let me tell you how bad I have it, what I'm going through. This is the problem with all of these things, is that it's running to other things or other people for comfort that are not God. In fact, it's actively running away from water when you're desperately thirsty. Lamenting is the act of running to God in your pain. I know it's hard, but find some time. Set aside time to lament, and it's going to take more than 5 minutes in passing. Maybe it's at night when your kids are in bed and you would normally try to relax or watch TV or recharge or whatever it is that you do, woodworking, I don't know. If you don't have kids, maybe it will take setting aside some time that you would normally spend doing something else other than the time you normally spend with God, but time that you would do something else to intentionally express your feelings to Him in a meaningful way. In other words, it's on purpose. Run to God. Take your suffering to Him. The second encouragement to lament, number 2, a second encouragement that I would give you today about how to lament is this. Structure can bring clarity in suffering. If you take a look at each of the 5 chapters in Lamentations, chapter 1, chapter 2, then chapter 4, and chapter 5, all have the same number of verses. Go ahead, get your Bible, pull it out, open it up to Lamentations, and see. 22 verses in each of those chapters. Is that a coincidence? No. You see, each poem begins with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The lamenter structured his laments with one thought for each letter. It's very intentional, and it must have taken a lot of thought, even some planning to lament. And then chapter 3 has 66 verses. He has 3 verses for each letter of the alphabet. You might ask why. Well, some people think that he did this in order to show how complete his suffering was, from A to Z, so to speak, like complete suffering. Others sometimes think that it was a way for the Jews who are going into exile to memorize the laments so that they could have them from memory. Either way, the whole book was not extemporaneous. We often think that extemporaneous, off the cuff, informal is better, like it's more genuine or something. And as a cultural, we tend to be less formal. But sometimes writing down your prayers or even writing poetry to express yourself, or even an acrostic like the Lamenter, it can help give you some clarity. And what you may find as you do something like this is that you intentionally start considering your words as you lament your concerns, and it can help you start to process and understand your thoughts and your feelings a little bit better, and maybe connect with God's perspective on those thoughts and feelings as well. So, journal, write, make music, even spoken word. I mean, it might seem formal, but it's a very helpful way to learn to lament. And you don't have to be an artist to do it. I mean, you just try to think more clearly about what you're saying in an intentional, clarifying structure. Number 3, my third encouragement to lament is stop fearing honesty with God and tell Him what's really going on in your heart. We talked about this a bit in the last video, but I have to address this again. I mean, we tend to fear honesty with God, and we don't really tell Him what's going on actually inside of our hearts. Let me express it this way. Maybe you feel like you can't say what you're really feeling to God because it sounds like you're mad at Him. Or maybe you really are actually mad at him, especially if you are suffering, if you are in tragedy right now. Maybe you're angry at him. But guess what? You're in really good company. Abraham, Moses, Jeremiah, Job, David, Peter, all of them argued with God. Very passionately, I might add. Or maybe you avoid telling God what's really going on in your heart because you're afraid that if you talk with him about your doubts, that you'll be giving in to the doubt and not having faith. Like those two things can't possibly exist at the same time in one person, doubt and faith. They can. Or maybe you avoid telling God what's really going on in your heart because you're afraid that what you're feeling sounds blasphemous. But then again, is God really waiting with bated breath for us to think the right things about him? Like it's really an indictment of his character if we sinfully accuse him of something he didn't do. The book of Job doesn't seem to support that idea. He's not indicted by us. Here's a big one, at least for men. Maybe you aren't very emotional or honest with your emotions because you say, I just don't feel like that, Dan. I'm not this bleeding heart that whines about my circumstances. I'm just not very emotional. I have no compulsion to sit down and pour out my emotions to God. I don't think I'm built that way. Well, if that's you, I'd say, let's go watch the Eagles together. Well, if you're in Philadelphia, let's go watch any of your favorite sports teams together and watch them lose. And then we'll see, do you have emotions? Or maybe I'll just take you out on the golf course because true hearts are revealed on the golf course. You have emotions. You just might not be used to honestly expressing them to God or maybe even yourself. So my second encouragement to lament is be honest and share that honesty with God. My fourth encouragement to lament is this. Hearing your heart matters to God. I mean, it really matters to him. Lamentations 2 tells us to pour out our hearts like water before the presence of God. Psalm 116 says that the Lord inclines his ear to the righteous, like he's straining to hear what you have to say. Psalm 18 says in very dramatic terms, go check it out. Psalm 18 says in dramatic terms that when David poured out his heart to God, God was willing to rip heaven and earth apart to come to his rescue. It goes on and on. Philippians, 1 Peter, all of Jesus' teaching. All the Bible affirms for us that God cares and responds when his people cry out to him. He doesn't necessarily always respond the way that we ask, but clearly hearing our heart matters to him. Have you ever wondered about Jesus' prayer in the garden the night he was arrested? The Bible tells us in Matthew 23 that Jesus poured out his heart to his Father that last night before he died. He was in such anguish that while he prayed, he sweat, as it were, drops of blood. And he prayed, Father, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours. As if to say, Father, I don't want to do this. Now, why do you think he prayed that way? I mean, he was God, right? He knew the plan. He knew that his death was necessary to save humanity and to redeem all of creation. It was planned from eternity past. So what was the point of him praying, let this pass from me, when he knew it wouldn't and couldn't? The Bible actually tells us. It says he was sorrowful unto death. He was lamenting. He was pouring out his heart to God, regardless of what would come at daybreak. And his father didn't ignore that seemingly irrelevant prayer. The connection was the point. The father wanted to hear. And he wants to hear your anguish too. So today, maybe right now, try it. Pour out your heart to God. Maybe write it down. Maybe create art or music or poetry. Maybe just journal your prayer. And in any of these mediums, remember this encouragement from Lamentations 3:55 to 58. I called on your name, O Lord, from the depths of the pit. You heard my plea. Do not close your ear to my cry for help. You came near when I called on you. You said, do not fear. You've taken up my cause, O Lord. You have redeemed my life. So try it. Thanks for quarantining with me. In my next study, I'll take a bit more of a deep dive into Lamentations chapter 1 and try to help answer one central question. Am I being punished? Is my suffering a punishment for something that I've done? Please like, share this as much as you would like. Please comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Share any questions that you might have. I would love to be in contact with you. Until then, and I hope you're able to join me, until then, shalom.